We shall move to questions without notice, and I give the call to the Honourable the Leader of the Opposition.
Thank you very much, Mr Speaker. My question is to the Prime Minister. Labor's renewables-only obsession is causing Australians' energy bills to skyrocket, pushing 500 families a week into energy poverty. The National Energy Regulator is now warning that 90% of Australia's existing baseload energy, which is used to firm up renewables, will leave the grid by 2034, within the next decade, and that our country will struggle to keep the lights on. Why is the Albanese government making life harder for Australian families who are already struggling to cope with Labor's cost of living crisis?
Order. The Minister for Climate Change will not interject while questions are being asked. Order. The Prime Minister has the call.
Thanks very much, Mr Speaker. Well, I don't accept what the Leader of the Opposition has just said about the Energy Regulator. Indeed, AEMO, in a statement of 25th of January, said this: record generation from grid-scale renewables and rooftop solar is triggering wholesale energy prices and greenhouse emissions to fall. That's actually what. That's actually what they. That's actually what they said. That's actually what they said. And the Leader of the Opposition asked me about, as he characterises it, he says it is the renewables-only approach. What I say, it is the market-led approach that leads you to the cheapest form of new energy, which is renewables. And when we talk about the approaches that are there, we could take an approach that they have taken. They have taken the nuclear road. And the Leader of the Opposition has said that that is where they want to go, down that road, in contravention of where the market would take us. And he says that once they fix 4 outstanding issues, safety, disposal, cost and location, then they'll be right down that road. But the Shadow Minister came up with less impediments than the Leader, to be fair. He says there are only 3 issues that they need to solve: technical feasibility, financial feasibility and community acceptability. Apart from that, it's all good, Mr Speaker. Apart from that, it's all good. Now, the climate is changing, but the Liberal Party never will, Mr Speaker. We saw it on Nemesis, Mr Speaker, the now Leader of the Opposition, who used the National Energy Guarantee put forward by the former Shadow Treasurer to try and take the leadership and the Prime Ministership, not through a vote of the people, but through the backing of the hard right of the Liberal Party.
The Prime Minister will pause. Order. Members on my right will cease objecting so I can hear from the Leader of the Opposition on a point of order.
Thank you very much, Mr Speaker. My point of order is on relevance. The Prime Minister has a situation where 500 families a week are being pushed into energy poverty. Can he answer a straight question and give them some—
Resume your seat. Remind all members, including the Leader of the Opposition, they are entitled to take a point of order on relevance. The member for Reid will cease interjecting. The Prime Minister has another 30 seconds to answer the question, and the Leader of the Opposition raises a relevant point of order. And I'm just going to ask the Prime Minister to return to the question.
Thanks, Mr Speaker. I suggest if the Leader of the Opposition wants us to go down the nuclear road, he should stop having meltdowns, Mr Speaker. He should stop having meltdowns. Because
Prime Minister will return to the question.
He consistently is all angry, Mr Speaker. Hopeless on energy, but always obsessed with power.
Give a call. Order. The House comes to order. We'll hear from the member for Gilmore.
My question is to the Minister for Employment and Workplace Relations. How is the Albanese Labor government supporting low-paid workers to earn more and keep more of what they earn, and what approaches have been rejected?
Give a call to the Minister for Employment, Workplace Relations and the Minister for the Arts.
Thanks, Mr Speaker, and thanks to the member for Gilmore, another member of this place committed to making sure that Australian workers earn more and keep more of what they earn. A big part of that is the government's approach to the annual wage review. As a result of the approaches that we've taken to the annual wage review over the last 2 occasions, people on the minimum wage are now earning $110 a week more than they were, and on top of that, they'll get a tax cut of $827. This year, the government again, the Albanese Labor government again, will argue that low-paid workers should not be going backwards. Now, that position is not matched by those opposite. Those opposite who call out right now real wages, not acknowledging that for the last 3 quarters we have had real wages rising, and also not acknowledging that after the Leader of the Opposition told business, "Go out and make the case for me," what's the next thing business does? Call for a real wage cut. That's what they've now called for. The 2% claim that has been put forward for business now is a real wage cut. Exactly their actions after they get the rant from the Leader of the Opposition telling them you need to go out there and go harder. What would that real wage cut mean, occupation by occupation? Already we know those on the minimum wage are getting a tax cut of $826 a year that those opposite did not want them to get. But now they would also get a $600 a year real wage cut if that 2% claim is what happened. Already we know a cleaner on award conditions is getting $1,047 a year extra on tax cuts, but the wage cut, they didn't want them to get the tax cut, and now there'd be a wage cut of $620 a year for a cleaner. For a retail worker, $640 a year wage cut in real terms. Those opposite want people to work longer for less. And it's no different to what they did. What they're pursuing now in opposition is matched by what they did in government. Never once did they argue for a pay rise at the annual wage review. Never once. They had low wages as a deliberate design feature. Now, it's not like they didn't make submissions to the annual wage review. They did. We'll all remember the subheading that was there on one of their submissions, the importance of low-paid work. That's what they argued to the Fair Work Commission. Keep wages low. That's what they argue now, to keep wages low. When the member for New England argued that a pay rise would just be window dressing, he was giving the same argument that those opposite one by one believe. They spent a decade keeping wages low, and now when people are struggling with cost of living, their answer is to cut wages.
Before I call the Leader of the Opposition, I just want to welcome people in the Distinguished Visitors Gallery today, the Deputy Prime Minister and Foreign Minister of Vanuatu, the Honourable Marty Saramaya MP. Welcome to Question Time. I'm going to give the call to the Honourable Leader of the Opposition.
Thank you very much, Mr Speaker. My question is to the Deputy Prime Minister. Can the Deputy Prime Minister advise the House that following the government's $5 billion order for nuclear reactors from Rolls-Royce, that our submariners are safe in the submarines with the nuclear reactor?
Give the call to the order, the member for Herbert. Give the call to the Deputy Prime Minister and the Minister for Defence.
Well, thank you, Mr Speaker, and I thank the Leader of the Opposition for his sneaky gotcha question about the nuclear reactors that were being constructed at Rolls-Royce in Derby. Can I just say we're talking about sealed nuclear reactors that will never be refuelled, that are of the size to power one machine, that are not designed to power cities, that will need to be disposed of for the first occasion in the early 2050s, where those opposite are talking about establishing a civil nuclear industry which, if it's to have any impact on emissions reduction, will need to be operating in the 2030s with all the attendant disposal associated with that. But let me make one other point. Yes, the nuclear reactors will be safe for both the submariners, as they will for those who are at HMAS Stirling. Why? Because we are spending an enormous amount of money to make sure that they are secure. Now, if you take that amount of money and apply it to all the
The Deputy Prime Minister will pause. I can appreciate the energy regarding this question, but I need to hear the answer. I literally can't hear anything. So it would assist the House if members could tone it down. The member for O'Connor, the minister is halfway through, and I want to hear the remainder of his answer.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. If you take the cost that is being spent to ensure the safety of those reactors in the nuclear-powered submarines, and you apply that cost to civil nuclear reactors, which those opposite are suggesting, what you end up with is the single most expensive source of power that can be purchased in the world in this country today. And that is what those opposite are seeking to put before the Australian people. The idea that you would try and draw some equivalence between small nuclear reactors, which are powering a single machine, with what those opponents are trying to suggest about nuclear reactors which are designed to power cities is patently ridiculous, and it's the kind of analysis which underpins the ridiculous thought that those opposite are trying to put on the Australian people.
Order. The member for Fisher will cease interjecting. When the House comes to order, I'll hear from the member for Wills.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. My question is to the Minister for Infrastructure, Transport, Regional Development and Local Government. Minister, how will the Albanese Labor government deliver Australians more choice when it comes to cleaner, cheaper to run cars after a decade of inaction?
Good question.
Order. The member for Page and the member for Hume will cease interjecting before I call the minister. The member for Canning, I just said don't interrupt before I call the minister. Give the call to the Minister for Infrastructure, Transport, Regional Development and Local Government.
Thank you so much, Mr. Speaker. And can I thank the member for Wills for the question. Of course, earlier today, the Minister for Climate Change and I stood with representatives of Toyota, Hyundai, Tesla, the Motor Traders Association of Australia, the Australian Automobile Dealers Association, the Electric Vehicles Council to announce a new vehicle efficiency standard that is right for this country. After extensive consultation, we have released a model that delivers Australians more choice of new cars. Will save Australians thousands of dollars at the Bowser, $95 billion less in petrol out to 2050. It will reduce the emissions that come from the cars that we drive, and a model where Australians can continue to buy the utes, the SUVs that we all love. And as we know, a new vehicle efficiency standard is not a new thing. It has been coalition policy for over a quarter of a century, with John Howard back in 2001 stating that the coalition was negotiating a new fuel efficiency standard for motor vehicles to reduce the amount of fuel consumed per kilometre travelled. Yet the Howard government, of course, could not deliver one. It's a policy that the then Abbott-Turnbull government, the Morrison government as well, with the member for Bradfield trying, with our support, it is becoming increasingly important that we harmonise our approaches to vehicle emissions with those in place in other countries. Yet they were unable to actually deliver. While this government is delivering what the Liberals and Nationals could not do, a new vehicle efficiency standard that is right for Australia, with legislation to be introduced into this place tomorrow. We've undertaken extensive consultation with the industry and the community and have incorporated sensible amendments and suggestions that make improvements to our preferred option whilst ensuring a sustainable and effective standard. A limited number of four-wheel drives, such as the Toyota Land Cruiser, a great vehicle, the Nissan Patrol, regarded as those workhorse vehicles, will move from the passenger car into the light commercial category. We're smoothing the emissions trajectory for light commercial vehicles, taking into account both the recently announced changes in the US and the different range of credits that are available there. And we're adjusting what is known also as the breakpoints. The standard will start on the 1st of January next year, but credits and penalties starting on the 1st of July. I want to thank everyone who's engaged constructively with this policy. This is how you actually make good policy, a lesson that those opposite might like to learn. You go out, you consult, you work collaboratively with industry to make sure that you've got the model right, and then you have the courage of your convictions and you make sure that you're delivering. Where the coalition gave up, Labor is doing the hard work of delivering what is right for Australia. Those opposite are happy to stand with Russia when it comes to vehicle efficiency standards. I'm happy to stand with Australian consumers.
Before I call the member for North Sydney, I have a number of acknowledgements, and I'll just ask the House to come to order so we can acknowledge our special guests who have joined us today. I inform the House that present in the gallery today are representatives from the Fred Hollows Foundation, including Founding Director of the Board, Gabby Hollows AO. We have Nick Champion, a former member for Spence and Minister in the South Australian Government, who will remain for question time. We have order. We have Duncan Armstrong OAM, former Olympian, and members of the National Cabinet, Youth Cabinet, led by Y Australia, John Erin, a former member for Victoria, and John Watkins, the former Deputy Premier of New South Wales. Welcome to you all. Now I give the call to the honourable member for North Sydney.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. My question is to the Minister for Immigration. The refugee and migration sector holds serious concerns about the impact of the Migration Amendment, Removal and Other Measures Bill 2024 will have on children. Parents and guardians will be forced, through the threat of criminal sanction, to take actions in aid of having their children removed from Australia. What has the government done to ensure this legislation does not violate the foundational principle of international human rights law in relation to the best interests of the child?
Give a call to the Minister for Immigration, Citizenship and Multicultural Affairs.
Thank you, Speaker, and I thank the member for North Sydney for her question and for her constructive and considered engagement on this issue and indeed on many issues relevant to the immigration portfolio, particularly those affecting refugees. But I would say, in respect of her question, a few things. Firstly, she would appreciate that there is a safeguard expressly in the Act which has just been passed through this House, which deals with children. I would also direct her more broadly to the Statement of Compatibility with Human Rights which accompanies the bill, which makes clear that this is a piece of legislation that is consistent with Australia's human rights obligations. What we are doing with this piece of legislation, this important piece of legislation, is to fill a very significant loophole, a loophole that affects a small cohort of people who have no basis upon which to remain in Australia, but who are refusing to cooperate with efforts to effect their removal. And importantly, as I believe the member knows, and all members should know, these people are not refugees.
Give a call to the honourable member for Fremantle.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. My question is to the Minister for Climate Change and Energy. What will the Albanese Labor government's new vehicle efficiency standard mean for Australian motorists, and what is the significance of this reform after a decade of inaction?
Call to the order. The Leader of the Nationals. Give the call to the Minister for Climate Change and Energy.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. I thank the honourable member very much for his question and for his very active leadership on matters of climate change in this House. And, Mr Speaker, the honourable member asked me what it means for Australian motorists that this government will introduce vehicle efficiency standards. And what it means is, after 20 years of governments promising Australian motorists and consumers to get better standards and better choices, this government will deliver it. This government will deliver after 20 years of failed promises. 5 decades after the United States introduced standards, Australia will catch up. Years after Japan, China, Saudi Arabia, India, New Zealand and Canada introduced standards, Australian motorists will catch up. 6 years after the previous coalition government promised to introduce the standards and consulted on details and then squibbed it, Australia will catch up. $4 billion of unnecessary expenditure on petrol and diesel over the last 6 years as a result of the previous government knowing that they should have introduced the standards but then not proceeding. Australian motorists will finally catch up. Now, the Minister for Transport and I held a press conference just before question time with Tesla and Toyota. With Tesla and Toyota, and the opposition front bench says Bonnie and Clyde. That's what they think of these Australian companies. They have quoted Toyota at every press conference. At every press conference, they've quoted Toyota, and every question time we can quote Toyota today. where the Chief Executive thanked the government for the engagement and said it's time for Australia now to move on and implement these standards, Mr Speaker. So,
Member for Lyons.
Mr Speaker, a broad cross-section of the motoring industry, joined by peak motorist groups, the NRMA, RACW, RACQ, for example, who actually represent motorists, Choice, who represents Australian consumers, now joined by the Motor Traders Association and the Automotive Dealers Association at the press conference, backing the government's position, have now called for the broad cross-section of the parliament to pass the legislation. You know who's opposed to legislation? The Liberal and National Party and Advance. They're the two groups that are left opposing the legislation. It's not too late. It's not too late for the opposition to reflect on their position. The Minister for Transport will introduce the legislation tomorrow. There's a chance for the opposition to say, OK, Toyota backs this. The Australian automotive dealers back it. The Motor Traders Association backs it. Hyundai backs it. The NRMA backs it. RACW backs it. The RACQ backs it. Maybe we should back it. Maybe we should stop being so negative. Maybe we should do what we promised to do in 2016 and 2017, that the Cabinet, that the Leader of the Opposition was a member of, decided and authorised the ministers to progress. Maybe it's time to catch up and actually be positive for once. Actually support the government and support Australian motorists for once.
Order. Give the call to the member for Fairfax.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. My question goes to the Minister for Climate Change and Energy. In the last week alone, we learnt that Labor has officially broken its promise of a $275 reduction in household power bills by up to $1,000. Over 500 families a week are going on energy hardship arrangements, and the East Coast gas market is facing material shortfalls from next year. Why is the Albanese government making life harder for Australian families already struggling to cope with Labor's cost of living crisis?
Order. When the House comes to order and there's no interjections, I'll call the Minister for Climate Change and Energy.
Well, thanks very much, Mr Speaker. I thank the honourable gentleman for his question. It went to two things as I heard the question. It went to energy prices and gas shortages. Let me deal with both. The honourable... The
minister will pause. The minister will pause. Order, order. No. We're just going to do this in an orderly manner. The minister was asked a question by the member for Fairfax. Within 12 seconds, the yelling, the screaming, that's not helpful, and he knows that's disrespectful, but he knows that's against the standing order. So the member for Fairfax will leave the chamber under 94A. Order. That sort of behaviour is, everyone knows, is completely unacceptable. The Minister for Climate Change and Energy has the call.
Thanks very much, Mr Speaker. The honourable member asked me about energy prices and he asked me about the impact of government policy. Well, the fact of the matter is that this government's intervention has saved a customer on Ausgrid $843. Well, Victoria, $555. $819 in South East Queensland. $992 in South Australia. These are policies introduced by this Prime Minister, this Treasurer, this government, opposed, actually voted against in all readings of the House and in the Senate by those opposite. And they have the temerity to come here and say we should do something about power prices when they voted against the intervention that was designed and has achieved those results. And then we saw last week the Leader of the Opposition misquoting the Australian Energy Regulator in a previous question, but what the Australian Energy Regulator actually did do last week is announce reductions in power prices, partly as a result of the intervention of this government, which they opposed. So it takes more front than David Jones to come in here and oppose those things and then ask why we aren't doing more. And the honourable member also asked me about the Statement of Gas Opportunities and how it flagged shortfalls in gas. Well, let's go through the gas Statement of Opportunities for the last 10 years. In 2013, the statement said, and I quote, there may be potential shortfalls in Queensland and New South Wales. In 2014, it said the short-term projected gas shortfalls remain unchanged to 2017. In 2015, it said forecast gas caps up to 2034 in Queensland are 214 petajoules. Gas supply gaps are 214 petajoules. In 2016, it said shortfalls totalling 50 petajoules are forecast. I think there's a pattern emerging, Mr Speaker. 2017, maintaining system security is becoming more challenging, said AEMO in that 2017 gas report. In 2018, they said projected southern gas supply gaps first appear in 2030. In 2019, Mr Speaker, they forecast gaps and being tight between 2021 and 2023. Two patterns have emerged. Shortfalls in every statement and all under a coalition government. Now, what we have done is introduce the Gas Code of Conduct, which has seen new supply being legally enforced and promised. That will deal and has dealt with the most immediate challenges relating to gas shortfalls. That is what we have done in relation to 10 years of policy indolence that they were warned about on multiple occasions and did nothing.
Give the call to the honourable member for Robertson.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. And my question is to the Minister for Social Services. How is the Albanese Labor government addressing cost of living pressures and helping Australians earn more and keep more of what they earn?
Call to the Minister for Social Services.
Thank you, Speaker, and I'd like to thank the member for Robertson for his question. He knows, as the government does, that many people are feeling the pinch with cost of living right now, which is why the Albanese government is taking action to provide people with support. In my portfolio of social services, we have strengthened the social safety net. Just last week, around 5 million people received a boost to their social security payments through indexation. Now, for those on payments like JobSeeker and recipients of Commonwealth Rent Assistance, this builds on the rate increases that the government delivered in the last budget, meaning more money in the pockets of those doing it toughest. And of course, we've strengthened the social safety net by expanding the eligibility for single parenting payment, benefiting over 77,000 single parents, mainly women. We've frozen the social security deeming rates and we've expanded access to the Commonwealth Health Seniors Card. We've taken action by helping concession card holders with their power bills. We've made medicines cheaper and we've made it cheaper for pensioners, children and other concession holders to see a GP. The government is also providing more support for new parents through our historic investment in paid parental leave by expanding the scheme to a full 6 months by 2026. Families will receive an extra 6 weeks of paid leave following the birth or adoption of their child. Now, when fully rolled out, that's over $5,000 more in the family budget. And it's not only our government ensuring that parents earn more while they take time off to look for their baby, but we're also ensuring women will retire with more with our recent announcements that we will pay superannuation on the government-paid parental leave scheme from July 2025. Now, in addition, we're also providing more support for community sector organisations, helping those organisations pay fairer wages to their workers. This includes fairer wages for people like Amelia, who works for St Pat's as a support worker, helping those experiencing homelessness. Now, like all community sector workers, not only will Amelia benefit from a pay increase, she will also benefit from Labor's tax cuts. Amelia will receive $1,330 in tax cuts in July this year to assist with the household budget. Our government is supporting Australians in a range of circumstances through the social services portfolio, whether it's those who rely on the safety net, work in the community sector or taking time out to be a parent. It is this government that is ensuring people earn more and keep more of what they earn.
Before I call the member for Hume, I'm pleased to welcome the New Zealand Minister for Commerce, Consumer Affairs, Small Business and Manufacturing, the Honourable Andrew Bailey. Give the call to the honourable member for Hume.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. My question is to the Prime Minister. Prime Minister, given Australia is in a GDP per capita recession, can the Prime Minister define what a GDP per capita recession is?
Order. 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 Oh, members on my left will see. Order. Order. Members on my left will cease interjecting. and members on my right will also join them. The Prime Minister has the call.
Thanks very much, Mr Speaker, and I thank the Shadow Treasurer for his question and for his constant talking down of the Australian economy. Constant talking down of the Australian economy, because he's quite upset because the comparison of Australia with the G7, or the comparison with the former government as well, shows that here in Australia we have an economy that continues to grow. We have wages that are growing, including real wages. We have inflation, which is continuing to moderate. We have productivity that is increasing, and we have a budget that has gone from a was a $78 billion deficit under that mob into a $22 billion surplus, Mr Speaker. And if you compare that with other economies in the region, we have higher economic growth than Canada, than France, than Germany, than Italy, than Japan, than the UK, not higher than the US, must be said, but higher than 6 of the G7 nations. We have employment growth that is higher than all the G7 nations.
The Prime Minister will pause. Order. The Minister for the Environment and Water will cease interjecting. The member for Hume on a point of order.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. Relevance. It was a very tight question about defining a GDP per capita recession. If the Prime Minister doesn't know the answer, he should sit down.
Resume your seat. The Prime Minister was asked about order. Order. The Minister for Social Services, the Minister for Infrastructure can cease with their interjections. The Prime Minister was asked about GDP per capita recessions. I take it the member's asking for a definition of what that is. You're requiring an answer. Well, under the standing orders, I've got to make sure I can't deliver that for the member for Hume. Just want to be upfront. I've got to make sure the Prime Minister is being directly relevant. I know the answer he would like, maybe other members, but whilst the Prime Minister is talking about the GDP, he is being directly relevant. Now, that's not the answer you want. I appreciate that. But under the standing orders, yes, I appreciate that. But under the standing orders, for the Prime Minister to be relevant, he's got to be talking about the issue, may not give the definition that you wish. Just hope everyone's clear on that and what the standing orders enable me to do. You want a direct answer? I can't do that. I can direct the Prime Minister to be directly relevant. Prime Minister has the call.
Thanks very much, Mr Speaker. But I'm surprised that they don't want to hear that Australia has faster economic growth than Canada, France, Germany, Italy, Japan and the United Kingdom. That they don't want to hear about that.
Order.
That we have a lower unemployment rate than Canada, France, Italy, the United Kingdom and the United States. That we have faster employment growth than Canada, France, Germany, Italy, Japan, the US and the UK. All G7 countries. We have faster employment growth. And what we saw last week with their questions, of course, was that when the figure came in at 3.7% for unemployment, with record employment growth under this government now, totalling more than 750,000 Australians in work, they hated it. They hated it. They talked it down, and they continued to talk down the Australian economy. And I'm not surprised that they continue to talk down the Australian economy because they have absolutely nothing positive to offer.
Order. The Deputy Leader of the Opposition will cease objecting. Give the call to the honourable member for Swan.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. My question is to the Treasurer. How is the Albanese Labor government helping in the fight against inflation? How does this compare to other approaches, and what does it mean for the budget?
Call to the Treasurer.
Thanks, Mr Speaker. What a great addition the member for Swan is to our team from the great state of Western Australia. The member for Swan knows, and we know, that Australians are under pressure, but more than acknowledging that fact, we are doing something about it. And 3 facts go to this, Mr Speaker. When we came to office, real wages were falling almost 3.5%. Now they're growing again. Inflation in quarterly terms was 2.1% when we came to office, now 0.6%. When we came to office, monthly inflation had a 6 in front of it. Now it has a 3 in front of it, Mr Speaker. And we'll get another monthly figure tomorrow. The monthly figures, as we know, are a bit less predictable, a bit more volatile, a bit less reliable than the quarterly figures. And whether the number tomorrow ticks up a little bit or ticks down a little bit, the direction of travel is very clear. We know that inflation is down substantially since its peaks in 2022, but we know that people are still under pressure. We know that we're making welcome and encouraging progress in the fight against inflation, but inflation is still higher than we'd like. And that's why our approach to inflation and to wages is so important. Now, Mr Speaker, we don't have an inflation problem in our economy because the lowest paid Australians are earning too much, Mr Speaker. We see decent wages growth as part of the solution to cost of living pressures, not part of the inflation problem. And that's why we think cost of living help and tax cuts should be in addition to, not instead of, a decent pay rise for minimum wage workers, Mr Speaker. Now, our cost of living policies are designed to put downward pressure on inflation. The ABS says we took about 0.5 percentage point off inflation last year as a consequence of our cost of living policies that those opposite voted against. And that meant, and I'm asked by the Shadow Treasurer right on cue, I'm very fortunate, Mr Speaker, he asked me about prices. Since the middle of last year, electricity prices have gone up about 3.5%. If they'd had their way, Mr Speaker, when they voted against our plan, electricity prices would have gone up more than 18%. Mr Speaker, when they voted against our cost of living help, they voted for higher inflation in our economy, Mr Speaker. Because of our efforts, inflation is coming down and wages are going up. And this helps ensure that people earn more and keep more of what they earn. And this is more important than ever in uncertain times, with our economy slowing and consumption flat and uncertainty in the world. And that's why, Mr Speaker, the focus on the next budget shifts a little bit but not a lot. Not away from what is responsible and what is affordable, but recognising that we've got this inflation challenge, but we've also got a growth challenge in our economy, and our fiscal strategy will shift a little bit as well, as we have a bigger emphasis on investment in the drivers of future growth in the economy, Mr Speaker. Still a primary focus on inflation, but not a sole focus on inflation. The reason why the first two budgets were successful, Mr Speaker, is because they are aligned to the economic conditions, and the third one will be as well.
Member for Hume. Give a call to the Honourable Deputy Leader of the Opposition.
My question is to the Prime Minister. If the government's energy policy is working, why are 500 families a week going on to energy hardship arrangements?
Order. The member for Spence will leave the chamber under 94A. Interjecting during a question, and particularly before a minister answers, is highly disorderly. I don't know why it's so hard for people to understand that. Give the call to the Prime Minister.
Thank you very much, Mr Speaker. I thank the Deputy Leader of the Opposition for her question. And the Deputy Leader was of course, one of those people who opposed our energy price relief plan, who opposed $3 billion in rebates for households and businesses that have made a substantial difference. The fact is that what we are doing is getting on with the job of making a difference, which is what our intervention into the gas and the coal market in an unprecedented way, to be fair. It wasn't something that was anticipated because Australia, like the rest of the world, was not anticipating the biggest energy crisis since the 1970s, since what occurred under OPEC way back in 1974. And as a direct result, governments around the world have had to take unprecedented action and have had the courage to do so, which is why we intervened in conjunction with both Labor and coalition governments at the state level to make a difference, to put caps on prices so as to limit those price rises, but then as well to provide relief by federal and state governments to households and to businesses. In addition to that, of course, the mechanisms that we've put in place to make a difference. For example, $1.6 billion for energy efficiency upgrades for homes and businesses, including the small business energy incentive. What we have done is to make a difference, is to be prepared to take action, and indeed the IEMO, who the opposition quoted earlier on, I'll quote again of what they actually said on the 25th of January. Record generation from grid-scale renewables and rooftop solar is triggering wholesale energy prices and greenhouse emissions to fall.
Call to the honourable member for Chisholm.
Thanks so much, Speaker. My question is to the Minister for Early Childhood Education. How will the Albanese Labor government's tax cuts provide cost of living relief and support the aspirations of educators and teachers in the highly feminised early childhood education and care sector?
Give a call to the Minister for Early Childhood Education and the Minister for Youth.
Many thanks, Mr Speaker, and many thanks to the wonderful member for Chisholm for her question. Come 1st July, Mr Speaker, 81,000 taxpayers in Chisholm will get a tax cut because of the actions of this government. And they join 13.6 million Australian workers in every single electorate right across the country who will see more money in their pockets to help with the cost of living. And Australian women taxpayers will get an average tax cut of $1,649 on average. Around 6 million Australian women will get a bigger tax cut under our government's plan as opposed to the plan of those opposite. The Albanese government wants to support the aspirations of all Australians, whether they be low-income earners, middle-income earners or high-income earners. And we want to support the aspirations of highly feminised sectors like early childhood education and care, where over 90% of the workers are women. Under our tax cuts, an early childhood educator earning $46,000 a year gets a tax cut of $829, and the average early childhood teacher gets $1,404 back into their pockets. Now, Mr Speaker, the dedicated and hard-working professionals who educate our youngest Australians love the work they do. They are passionate about early childhood education and child development. But, Mr Speaker, as they often tell me, love doesn't pay the bills. That's why we want early childhood educators to earn more and to keep more of what they earn. We've already supported 2 increases in modern awards benefiting early childhood educators. We've changed the Fair Work Act so that early childhood educators can bargain for better wages and conditions, something that they've aspired to for far too long. We know there's more to do, and we're actively working with the sector and the unions to retain those talented and dedicated professionals, but also to attract new workers into the sector towards a sustainable early childhood education system for all Australians. Now, when those opposite were last in government, keeping wages low was the centrepiece of their economic agenda. They want early childhood educators to work longer for less. They don't want them to get a tax cut, and they don't want them to earn more. In contrast, on this side of the House, the Albanese Labor government wants all Australians to earn more and to keep more of what they earn.
Give a call to the honourable member for Kennedy.
Prime Minister, a farmer ploughs, tilts, fights disease, weed, irrigates, fertilises, harvests, cleans and delivers to stores. Cold and worthless pay the farmer 49 cents a potato, put it on a shelf and charge customers $4.50, an 800% markup. Their CEOs get $10 million a year. The vanishing checkout check gets $50,000. In 1990, they had 50.1% market share. 2001, they had 70.1 ABS ANOP figures. At this 2% a year, they're over 80%. PM, if divestiture, won't you be like Roosevelt, have your face carved on Mount Remarkable with Tuvatra, Ralph Honor and Red Ted Theodore?
One of the best. Give the call to the Prime Minister.
Thank you for the unique member for Kennedy for that question, and indeed the member for Kennedy is many things. I would describe him absolutely though as fair income, about his commitment to his electorate, his commitment to people, whether they be farmers or miners, whoever they are in his seat. He's a champion for his community, and the issues that he raises here about Australian producers and farmers, the feeling that they don't get a fair shake from the product of their work, I think he's spot on. When farmers are getting less money for their product, whether it be a potato as the one that he used, or any other veggie or product, then you would expect that to translate into cheaper prices at the checkout. And the truth is that it hasn't done so. And that is why my government's determined to hold them to account. That's why we've got the ACCC conducting an inquiry. They'll produce an interim report as well as then a final report. The options that are open for them are, of course, we've already increased penalties for anti-competitive conduct. We've already banned unfair contract terms. We've set up a competition task force in Treasury, which is actually considering Australia's merger laws. And the government has also charged former Competition Minister Craig Emerson with reviewing the Food and Grocery Code at the moment. That is a voluntary code, and we're looking at whether mandating is necessary there as well. I note that the Leader of the Nationals has said that the coalition were too slow when they were in government, and the Nationals wanted to move at a lot quicker pace in terms of the compulsory grocery code. Well, we haven't got the Liberal Party holding us back, I say to the Leader of the Nationals. They're heroes in opposition. They just didn't get around to it. They just didn't get around to it.
The Leader of the Nationals
in the
will
10
cease
years that they were in government. So what we'll do, the member for Kennedy, is certainly respond to any recommendations that are made, including recommendations by the ACCC. I want to continue to work with the member for Kennedy. I'm not sure I'll continue to work on some of his creative suggestions that he's made to the landscape of far north Queensland up there.
The Prime Minister's time has concluded. Give the call to the honourable member for Parramatta.
Thank you, Speaker. My question is to the Minister for Skills and Training. How is the Albanese Labor government helping people to skill up in areas of demand like nursing, construction and early childhood education after a decade of cuts and neglect to the skills sector? And how is the government making sure people can attain these vital skills while not adding to cost of living pressures?
Give the call to the Minister for Skills and Training.
Can I thank firstly, Speaker, can I thank the member for Parramatta for his question. He's very, very strong advocacy for the vet sector and TAFE in his electorate and beyond. And, Speaker, I'd like to start by informing the House that 355,557 Australians enrolled in fee-free TAFE in 2023. That's almost doubling. That's smashing the original target set at the Jobs and Skills Summit. And, of course, like any good government policy, fee-free TAFE serves more than one end and it benefits many. It removes cost barriers to much-needed skills for students, apprentices and workers. It provides skills to businesses and the labour market, and in doing so it provides more carers to care for older Australians. It provides more electricians to help with the transition in the economy. It also provides more tradies to help build homes and ensure that we build public infrastructure. The government fully understands, Speaker, that without the right investment in education and training, whether that's universities or TAFE, we will not have the pipeline of skills that we need to decarbonise the economy. We will not have the right skills to ensure the optimal use of the National Reconstruction Fund, or to improve health services, or to teach preschool kids.
That is critical, and that's the skills agenda of this government. In 2023, more than 80,000 of fee-free TAFE students enrolled in the care sector courses, more than 30,000 in technology and digital, almost 20,000 in early childhood education and care. And, Speaker, the combination of the fee-free TAFE policy and Labor's tax plan have relieved cost of living pressures for people across this country. Just take two examples. A Victorian training to be a nurse will not need to find a $15,000 fee to enrol, and indeed becoming a nurse on $75,000 will actually save up to $1,554 as of the 1st of July. A civil construction trainee in Darwin need not find almost $3,000 on course fees, and the tax cuts mean a plant operator earning $90,000 will keep almost $2,000 of what they earn. And indeed, all taxpayers from the 1st of July, Speaker, will be getting a tax cut. An enormous 84% of those taxpayers will be better off under Labor's plan compared to the plan of those opposite. Because, Speaker, we want people to access education and training, but we also want to make sure that they earn more and they keep more of what they earn. By way of contrast, the opposition has no plans, no policies, just not even a thought bubble when it comes to responding to the skills shortage in this country. They do not support our skills initiatives. They do not, Speaker, support real wages going up, and they do not support Labor's tax plan.
Give a call to the honourable member for New England.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. My question is to the Minister for Climate Change and Energy. Can the minister confirm that even after the Prime Minister's personal intervention to fix the mess of Labor's new family car and ute tax, families buying one of Australia's most popular vehicles, the Toyota Land Cruiser, will still be facing a tax making it more than $10,000 more expensive than it is today? Why are Australians farming families paying for the price of Labor's naive, ideologically driven energy policies?
Order. Members on my right will cease interjecting. Give the call to the Minister for Climate Change and Energy.
Well, I thank the honourable member very much for his question, Mr Speaker. I'm not sure who he thinks makes the Hilux. Lamborghini, maybe, because the Chief Executive of Toyota just was at a press conference with me and the Minister for Transport explicitly disagreeing with the premise just put by the honourable member for New England. Who should we believe? Who should we believe about Toyota? The member for New England or the Chief Executive of Toyota? I'm not. I mean, maybe the member for New England knows more about the impact on Toyota than the Chief Executive of Toyota. The Chief Executive of Toyota said, and I quote, "It's really been Toyota's position for some time that we wanted an emissions standard to basically help us with long-term product planning and where we're going. We wanted an emissions standard that's basically ambitious but also brings people on the journey and doesn't leave people behind, and that is where we are. We appreciate the fact the government has given us an opportunity and a voice to all parties and have been able to be consulted. We think the amendments that have been made, we support the government in the amendments that have been made, and I think they're a positive step forward." And he was asked explicitly whether he agreed with the coalition's description of our policy that the honourable member just put. He said no. No, Mr Speaker. So, why don't you ask us more about the position of Toyota?
Order. Give a call to them. The members on my right will cease interjecting. I want to hear from the member for McEwen.
Thank you, Speaker. My question is to the Prime Minister. What are some of the elements of the Albanese Labor government's plan for a future made in Australia, and how is it strengthening our economy and our communities after a decade of neglect?
Give the call to the Prime Minister.
I thank the member for McEwen for his question, and of course, to go off the questions that have been asked by those opposite, of course, one of the things that we don't make in Australia anymore is motor vehicles, because those people over there told them to leave. Told them to leave. Didn't think it was worthwhile. Now, this government's position is very different. We believe in a future made here in Australia. We believe in greater diversity of what we can make. We believe that we need to train and upskill Australians to make high-value, complex manufacturing all the way through.
The Deputy Leader of the Opposition. The Deputy Leader of the Opposition. If I call your name, that's the ideal time to stop. So we're just going to make sure when the questioner was heard in silence, the same courtesy is going to be responded to the person answering the question. So we're just going to take the temperature down for the remainder of this answer. The Prime Minister has the call.
Thanks, Mr Speaker. One of the things we have done is the National Reconstruction Fund. It's already in discussions with companies.
Order. Order. The Deputy Leader of the Opposition is now warned. So it can't be fairer than that. Oh, no, the Deputy Leader of the Opposition will leave the chamber under 94A. If I'm warning you, that is definitely not the time to interject. Okay, the Prime Minister has the call.
Thanks, Mr Speaker. The NRF that doesn't have a colour-coded spreadsheet. The NRF that actually requires companies to come forward and have business cases in order to get funding and co-investment from government. That's the process that we are doing. But we believe that you can have cheaper, cleaner energy, making sure that we value add, making sure that we make more things here, making sure that in areas such as the former coal-fired power stations that shut under their watch across there, that we make use of that access to make things at those locations rather than have a nuclear power plant, a nuclear reactor from the nuclear reactionaries over there. That's their vision going forward as well. And we see practical examples. We see practical examples with the deal just announced in the last fortnight and completed for 100 boxes being made in Redbank in Queensland. An example of whereby this heavy weapon carrier will be exported to Germany, a deal worth $1 billion to the Australian economy, a deal in which 600 direct jobs will be created in Queensland alone, with flow-on effects right across the supply chain. That's why you need to make things here, to make sure that you have that expansionary economy, that you are also not dependent just upon imports for things that are critical. That's why we have our critical minerals plan. That's why we are engaging in making more things here in Australia. It is a fundamental belief that this government is putting in place day by day right across the portfolios.
Give the call to the honourable member for Calare.
To the Prime Minister. A year after the storm and flood disaster hit Eugowra, Molong, Canandra, Kudal and Manildra in central western New South Wales, the state and federal governments each stumped up $50 million to support 4 local government areas. It's become very clear that this amount will not be enough. With the federal budget looming, our communities are requesting further financial support, including for housing, so that nobody is left behind. Will your government answer those calls and deliver further funding?
Give the call to the Prime Minister.
I thank the member for Calare for his question. I thank him as well for hosting my visit to Eugowra on Friday. Previously, the member for Calare had asked me to return. It's a site that I went to in 2022, a community that was devastated by these terrible floods, as were many areas in the member for Riverina seat, the member for Page and others. Of course, more recently I visited in Queensland on the Gold Coast and far north Queensland. All up, we've delivered some $600 million for flood relief, including, of course, in Eugowra. That has included $20 million from each level of government for the Resilient Homes program in the Central West, supporting the New South Wales Reconstruction Authority to consult with councils and the local community on a buyback program there, a buyback program that's in place in Lismore in the electorate of Page. We've also provided for a share of the $25 million Community Assets program, and I've spoken to Kevin Beattie, the Mayor of that Shire, about applications there. When I was in Eugowra, I think we met just about everyone in that town. They are brave, resilient people, and I pay tribute to them. I thank Kay and Max for welcoming us into their home that has been rebuilt. You can see the watermark on their property, which was there. Most of their possessions they lost in the floods. They weren't insured, but they used some grant money to take out, as well as a small mortgage on their house to repair and rebuild. They moved into that home last year just before Christmas, and they're just terrific people. They're typical of the people who we met in the main street. There was a vintage car exhibition on in the main street last Friday night, and therefore there was a lot of people around, and we engaged with them. We consulted with them. We'll continue to work with the New South Wales Government. I thank the member for the genuine representations that he has made on behalf of individual constituents, but also on behalf of his communities. At the worst of times, we see the best of the Australian character, and I certainly saw that with the people who I met in Eugowra last week. We will work with the New South Wales Government, who of course run the Reconstruction Authority as well, on what further can be done. We remain on all of these issues. I don't regard them as partisan issues. I go into electorates when I'm asked to, and we provide what assistance we can. And I look forward to continuing to work on these issues with the member for Calare.
We call to the honourable member for Lingiari.
Thank you, Speaker. My question is to the Minister for Education. Minister, what is the Albanese Labor government doing to make it easier for people in regional Australia to go to university, to earn more money and to keep more of what they earn?
Call to the Minister for Education.
Thanks very much, Mr Speaker, and can I thank my friend the legendary member for Lingiari for a question. A couple of weeks ago I was in Taree with the member for...
Order.
Did something happen?
Order.
Did you smile again? Once only once a week.
Order. The Minister will ignore the interjections.
I'll try, Mr Speaker, I will try. A couple of weeks ago I was in Taree with the member for Lyme, and we visited the Taree University Study Hub. And on the wall as you walk in there's a sign that says, "Go further, closer to home." In Taree there's about 270 students at the moment doing more than 80 different degrees and courses at universities right across the country, and they don't have to move away from home to do it. We want Australians to earn more and keep more of what they earn, and a key part of that is helping more Australians to get a crack at going to TAFE or to university. If you've got a university degree, you earn, on average, an extra $30,000 a year more than somebody whose last year of education was Year 12. Almost 1 in 2 young Australians in their 20s today has a university degree, but not everywhere. Not in regional Australia. In regional Australia it's about 28%, and in the more remote parts of Australia it's even less. And that's why these hubs are important. The evidence is that where they are, there are more people who go to university and there are more people who finish their university degree. In other words, they work. At the moment, there are 34 right across the country, and as part of the Universities Accord, we're doubling that. 20 more in the regions and 14 in the outer suburbs of our big cities. Yesterday, I announced the location of the first 10 of those new regional university study hubs. They'll be everywhere from the Pilbara in northwest of WA to East Arnhem Land in the Territory to King Island off the coast of Tassie. There'll also be new hubs in Innisfail, Warwick, Chinchilla and Longreach in Queensland, Victor Harbour in South Australia, Gippsland in Victoria and Katanning in WA.
Order.
Yesterday I also announced more funding for 2 existing hubs in Mudgee and Cowra in New South Wales. Applications for the new suburban hubs will open shortly, and applications for the next 10 regional hubs will open after that. And as I've said in this place before, I urge members talk to their communities, talk to their local TAFE and universities and encourage them to apply. These hubs are a key part of helping more Australians to get a crack at going to university, and that'll help them to earn more, and our tax cuts will help them to keep more of what they earn.
Call to the honourable member for Lindsay.
My question is to the Minister for Climate Change and Energy. The Australian Energy Market Operator warned Australia faces a gas shortage which could emerge by next winter, and the East Coast market will be in yearly supply deficit by 2028. Senex Energy CEO Ian Davies said the gas market is a mess and that, quote, something needs to change and quickly before large industries battle for survival and the lights go out. Why is the Albanese government making life harder for Australian families who are already struggling with Labor's cost of living crisis?
Give a call to the Minister for Climate Change and Energy.
Well, thanks, Mr Speaker. I thank the honourable member for her question and congratulate her on her elevation to the front bench. And she's asked me several questions already, and she's already the most effective shadow minister I've faced this term, Mr Speaker. But I have to correct her gently on the premise of her question. Because she asked me about the gas statement of opportunities and the shortages that the gas statement of opportunities talked about. I ran the House through a few minutes ago how every single equivalent statement in the 10 years that those opposite were in office warned of gas shortages. Every single one. And it wasn't just the gas statement of opportunities, Mr Speaker. Those opposite received other warnings. In February 2014, the Department of Energy said there's uncertainty about the timing and quantum of supply to the domestic market, which will flow through to the prices being faced by domestic consumers. In April 2016, the ACCC said the future supply outlook is uncertain when it comes to gas. In 2017, the Australian Energy Market Corporation said reform is needed now to keep pace with the changing East Coast gas market and to ensure sufficient flexibility so consumers don't pay more than necessary for their gas. In September 2017, the ACCC again warned the East Coast gas market outlook for 2018 has deteriorated significantly, and significant supply shortfalls are now likely. These are just a few of the warnings that those opposite received.
The Minister will pause, and the member for Lindsay on a point of order.
Point of order on relevance. Australian families are struggling. Why is the government making it harder in this cost of living crisis? I didn't ask about alternative policies.
Order. Order. No, the member for Lindsay is entitled to raise a point of order. The minister can answer the question, but he just simply can't remain for the remainder of his answer talking about the opposition, or he can do some compare and contrast, but he's halfway through, so he can turn back to what the government is doing if he disagrees with the premise. So the minister has the call. The member was entitled to raise that point of order. The member has the call.
Certainly, Mr Speaker, and the honourable member raised a statement of opportunities, and as I said, they were warned time after time. Now, what we have done in contrast to those opposite who did nothing, we have introduced the mandatory gas code of conduct, which those opposite opposed. And I'll tell you what the mandatory gas code of conduct has done. It has already secured 564 petajoules of legally enforceable additional supply commitments, Mr.
Leader of the Nationals.
Legally enforceable additional supply commitments into the domestic market by 2033. And in November we announced another 140 petajoules of gas will be made available between now and 2027. That's what this government's policies have done, Mr Speaker. Now, we inherited the situation of ongoing gas shortages, and what we have done is introduce policies to alleviate the situation. That is what we've done, and that's what those opposite failed to do.
Give a call to the member for Bendigo.
Thank you, Speaker. My question is to the Minister for Regional Development, Local Government and Territories. How is the Albanese Labor government responding to the economic times and delivering tax cuts for local government workers across Australia?
Give the call to the Minister for Regional Development. She has the call.
Thank you, Mr Speaker, and I want to thank the member for that question. She's a big advocate for her local councils, and I only met with the City of Bendigo last week. In her electorate alone, 66,000 taxpayers will be receiving, on average, a tax cut of $1,424. That's 88% of taxpayers who will be better off under Labor's tax cuts. And, Mr Speaker, on this side of the House, we take local government seriously, valuing the work they do for our communities, undertaken by thousands of workers across our country. We want to make a real difference to the cost of living for those who work in our local government sector. We want them to earn more and to keep more of what they earn, Mr Speaker, and we have delivered. People across Australia will see an increase in their pay packets. Under Labor, our outdoor teams, who keep our streets clean, our parks tidy and our rubbish collected, will receive an average tax cut of $1,760. A hard-working grader operator, who we know are in high demand right across the country, who earns around $74,200, will receive a tax cut of $1,535. A council parks and garden supervisor on $105,000 a year will see a tax cut of $2,304, because on this side of the House we believe people should earn more and they should keep more of what they earn. That's why Labor's tax cuts will deliver on that promise from the 1st of July, unlike those opposite who want people to work longer for less. I've met with over 200 local governments across Australia who have told me that cost of living pressures are biting in their communities, and attracting workers to the sector can be difficult. And I now hear from them that Labor's tax cuts will make a real difference to the sector. Because on this side of the House, we've always backed local governments. We brought them back to the table of National Cabinet. We re-established the Council of Local Governments. We've increased road black spot funding. We're doubling roads to recovery. We take our job seriously, and we know that they're a trusted delivery partner across the nation. I've said it before and I will say it again. On this side of the House, we believe in what we do. We deliver for what our communities ask for, and they asked us to make sure that local governments were looked after, and that's exactly what this side of the House is doing. We have delivered more for local government in our nearly 2 years than those opposite did in 10. And that's why they continue to engage with the Albanese Labor government. We've already had over 400 registrations for the Australian Council of Local Governments later this year, and every member of this House engages with local councils because we know how important they are to delivering the services our communities need.
Call to the honourable member for Hughes.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. My question is to the Minister for Climate Change and Energy. 64,000 households are on electricity hardship in New South Wales. New South Wales households on hardship have increased by 82% under Labor's watch. That's nearly 366 households added to electricity hardship in New South Wales every week under Labor. Why is the Albanese government making life harder for Australian families who are already struggling to cope with Labor's cost of living crisis?
Call to the Minister for Climate Change and Energy.
Well, thanks very much, Mr Speaker. I thank the honourable member for her question, but feel obliged to remind her that she voted against bill relief, Mr Speaker. She voted against coal and gas caps to help the constituents she refers to. She voted against providing rebates to people paying energy bills and small businesses, Mr Speaker. So instead of coming in here and asking questions about it, it might have been better if she voted to support those constituents that she refers to. That might have been realistic support she could have given to her constituents. She could have actually extended a hand of friendship to the government that was introducing those coal and gas caps, which have been effective, Mr Speaker, and the rebates as well. Instead, Mr Speaker, the honourable member is a member of a party which is proposing to introduce the most expensive form of energy available at $86 billion for one nuclear reactor, and we very much look forward to that debate.
Give the call. Order. Give the call to the honourable member for Solomon.
Thanks very much, Speaker. My question is to the Minister for Health. How are the Medicare urgent care clinics making it easier for Australians to see a doctor, and how is the Albanese Labor government working with the states and territories to strengthen Medicare after a decade of cuts and neglect?
Give the call. Order. Give the call to the Minister for Health and Aged Care.
Thank you, Speaker, and I thank the member for Solomon for his question. He is a relentless advocate for better and cheaper health care in the top end. He has the great privilege of representing the hard-working hospital staff from the Royal Darwin and the Palmerston hospitals, every single one of whom will receive a tax cut on the 1st of July. And he knows that a large part of those staff's work is driven by aeromedical retrievals, bringing people into Darwin from outside and also transferring some of them down to the bigger hospitals in Adelaide and Melbourne. And along with the member for Lingiari, Mr Speaker, the member for Solomon argued relentlessly for our government to fund a second rescue helicopter and a second jet for CareFlight. And it's been terrific to visit CareFlight with the member for Solomon and see those assets already operating, ensuring 365-day per year coverage for the territory. Now, he also promised his community a Medicare urgent care clinic, Mr Speaker, and as of next week, the clinic in Palmerston will have been operating for 6 months, 7 days a week, fully bulk billed. It's seen around 5,000 patients already, a third of whom are under 15 years of age. And this terrific service is not only providing urgent care when and where people need it in Darwin and Palmerston, it's also taking pressure off those local hospitals. Around half of the patients who've been asked at that clinic have said they would have otherwise have had to go to the emergency department if the clinic wasn't available. The member for Solomon and our government are utterly committed to strengthening hospital services in the top end, not just relieving pressure from the EDs, but also correcting a long-standing inequity that sees the Northern Territory receive a smaller share of hospital funding than any other jurisdiction in the country. But the landmark deal that the Prime Minister secured with National Cabinet in December, Mr Speaker, will fix that inequity, delivering more than $160 million in additional funding to Territory hospitals in the first year alone of our new funding agreement. This government's approach, Mr Speaker, could not be more different from that of the Leader of the Opposition when he was the Health Minister, kicking off those 10 years of cuts and neglect that the member for Solomon talking about. By cutting funds to general practice in his first budget as Health Minister, he piled the pressure on hospital emergency departments, and then he cut hospital funding as well by $50 billion across the country, according to his own budget glossy from his first budget, slashing around $90 million just from the top-end hospital network in the first few years of those cuts. Well, this government, Mr Speaker, is delivering more support for the Territory in housing, in schools and in healthcare as well. All they got from the Leader of the Opposition was cuts and chaos.
Order. Order. Members on my right. Order. The member for Deakin's going to be heard in silence. He has the call.
Thank you very much, Mr Speaker. My question is to the Prime Minister. Over 8 of the last 10 years, the number of homes built in Australia has matched the number of migrants coming in. But in the last 2 years of your government, twice as many people are coming as houses being built. Why is the Albanese government making life harder for Australian families who are already struggling with your cost of living crisis?
Order. Members on my right will cease interjecting. Give the call to the Prime Minister.
I thank the member for his question. And he, of course, in referring to the last 10 years, ignored the fact that during this thing called the pandemic, and you remember that, the borders were closed. The borders were closed. So no one was coming in.
Order.
No one was coming in. They missed that. They missed that, Mr Speaker. No one was coming in. And then when the pandemic ended, their leadership, including the Leader of the Opposition, called for more migration, not less. Called for more, not less.
Order.
And we're, of course, cleaning up the mess that was left, because they left a system whereby students could just come in willy-nilly without any proper...
Yep. The Prime Minister will pause. The member for Hume will cease interjecting. The want the member for Deakin to state the point of order and I'll give a statement after the point of relevance. He has the call.
Thanks, Mr.
So
Speaker.
the Prime Minister's completed his
point
answer.
of order's relevance.
Resume your seat. Resume your seat. Order. Order. The member for Deakin, I'm just going to remind him, I'm sure he wants to stay for the remainder of question time and beyond. I'd like him to. Order. The member for Macon has the call.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. My question is to the Minister for Veterans Affairs and Defence Personnel. How is the Albanese Labor government delivering cost-of-living relief, services and support for defence personnel, veterans and their families?
Call to the Minister for Veterans Affairs and the Minister for Defence Personnel.
Well, thank you, Speaker. And I want to thank the member for Macon for this very important question and also acknowledge the support that he provides advocating for the over 4,800 veterans across his community, many of whom work in the very important area of defence industry across Adelaide. And of course that's an area that is only going to expand with the announcement last week by the Minister for Defence of ASC and BAE being the sovereign submarine nuclear submarine builder in South Australia, which is a great achievement and a great announcement. And it's all part of how the Albanese government is committed to delivering the best possible supports for our defence personnel, veterans and families. And Labor wants to ensure that people earn more and they keep more of what they earn. And that's why we are delivering a tax cut to every Australian taxpayer, including our veterans and to the members of our Defence Force. Indeed, 87% of Australian Defence Force personnel will receive a higher tax cut than they would have under the Liberals' plan. And further to that, of course, any former serving member of the Defence Force, now, no matter what industry they're working in, whether it's defence industry or any other area, will also be receiving a tax cut. And of course, our veterans make great employees supporting businesses across Australia because they bring those great skills of teamwork, leadership, agility, being able to work under pressure. And they are all great skills that support any industry across Australia. But some veterans do need assistance to be connected to work, and work is of great benefit for those transitioning into civilian life to make sure that that transition is successful. And that's why employment and connection to employment is a key feature of our Veterans and Families Hubs that we are rolling out across the country. And over the last few weeks, I've been very happy to be announcing funding for hubs in the Surf Coast and Geelong region, in the Hawkesbury and south-western Sydney, in the Hunter, in Ipswich and the Tweed. And of course last year in Northern Adelaide and in Rockingham in Western Australia. We're also working to improve supports for veterans through our reform to the Veterans Compensation Legislation System, and we are now consulting on an exposure draft of the Veterans Entitlements, Treatment and Support Simplification and Harmonisation Bill, delivering on the first recommendation of the interim report of the Royal Commission into Defence and Veteran Suicide. This will deliver a movement from 3 different pieces of complex legislation to one ongoing piece of legislation so that veterans get better access to service and supports, advocates can support them and DVA can provide better and faster processing of their claims so that we are delivering on a better future for our veterans and families.
Call to the Prime Minister. Order. Order. The member for Dawson can resume his seat. Prime Minister has the call.
They ran out of questions before, Mr. Speaker. So I asked that further questions be placed on the notice paper. I'm not sure who he is. Is he a member?
Order.